for coming on the podcast. So I know you. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you're up to, what you're working on?
Yeah, look, I've been in Silicon Valley at the kind of the birth of the commercial internet with Cisco, Juniper, and Calix. So I've done enterprise network, I've done service provider network. The last 10 years, I was involved in the broadband space, the last mile, so we can connect the home through fiber. And the role I had was essentially software development. So each one of those companies need like a network operating system to power the switches, the router, the firewall. I mean, you name it, the home gateway. And basically I had to go at the time in those companies where they were either in the boom, like Cisco, and the doom after that, the dot-com bust, and then we have to rebuild the business. Juniper was a case where after 10 years of emerging as kind of the high performance writing company, their system were not aging well. So I had to re-engineer kind of the processes, the infrastructure, the quality, the testing, you name it, so we can compete again on a new and scale the business if you want. And in the case of Calix, it was more around fiber. For 20 years was hard to justify the economic in the home. And then suddenly, with the working from home and COVID, everybody realized that if they don't have bandwidth to the home or capacity, their user experience is going to be compromised. So we had to rethink the business from the end user and not just connecting a home. And what will it take to basically carry all this traffic with high level of quality so you don't have to worry about it. We also realized that service from the device will be delivered to the cloud. So we have to build essentially a cloud infrastructure. So 3 stages of transformation: scale, re-engineer, reinvent the company. And now after that, look, I left after 10 years Calix because for me it was like, I kind of done the work. Probably I have ADT. I need to do other things. And then the question was what? And there was a notion to say, am I calling it down? But there was a couple of things I wanted to do. The book came from, that's a personal desire to show or try to live a legacy where people can learn from my experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you want. What I learned also to manage people, because look, at the end, it's all about the people. I mean, as much people can say about the technology will make the product. It's going to be your team that you need to motivate, you need to, to guide, you need to show them a path where they feel that they're going to be rewarded for all the hard work they do. And it's all about trust, but it's also about, compassion. I mean, there's a human side also. We're not machine, by the way. So sometimes you have to learn how to do this. And you can imagine when I had to do this, it's quite different to say, I'm going to manage a team face to face in US, but then what do you do with your team in China? What do you do with your team in India? They work around the clock, but they have different culture. So how you try to get a common purpose, acknowledge the difference, acknowledge the ambition also could be different, and ultimately try to harmonize this whole thing to get a result if you want. And that was a little bit the motivation in the book. And the last thing I wanted to do is to say, well, you always start as an engineer. You're the smartest of the pack. You go to technical lead, you go to director, and then something happened after that where you don't know what it will take to become a vice president, SVP, or CXO if you want. Because you have to move from a specialist, if you want, to a generalist. And it's hard for engineer, by the way. It's like, okay, now you have to understand the business, the customer, the market, the competitor, the investor, the shareholder. And some can make the turn, but there's some recipe also. And the way I try to explain the recipe is it's like a kitchen, by the way. You're running a kitchen at scale. Customer has expectation in the front of the room. You get the order to build and assemble. It could be chaos. I don't know if you ever seen a kitchen. It's like things are burning, things are dropping, people are screaming. But at the end, when you present the end result to the customer, you become essentially all tied together. So I was trying to explain that the chef doesn't cook every meal. He has to delegate. He has to empower. You cannot have too many cook, otherwise you step on each other's toes or you kill yourself in the process. kind of the base thing. This is how you run a business if you want.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends also where the company is. If the company is in growth, it's a different ways to motivate or align the people. But if you're going to a hard time, wow. So what do you change
Right.
to keep your employee motivated in the boat if you want? So that was the kind of the idea of the boat. And after that was like, with this, as an engineer, I was never good to kind of elevate my brand, if you want. There was a story to tell. People were asking me, why don't you share it? And from the book will probably come a TED Talk in a few months. And then it's all about, maybe I go consulting or maybe I'll go help another company. But it's fun now. I'm learning your science, which scare me, by the way. But it's fun.
So you have a book out now, and it's been out for a little less than a month, I believe you said?
3 weeks.
Yeah. And so explain a little bit about behind the book. Why'd you decide to write a book? What's the book about? I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So, like I said, the book was around, first message was around, I wanted to inspire people to say, it's not where you were born that dictate what you're going to become. And the reason is I was born on a chicken farm in Quebec. So if you look into how the hell I managed to do that and end up running kind of the biggest team in Silicon Valley, competing with a lot more people versus Canada, for example, for the same job. So I wanted to explain that ultimately you're going to have a belief and a desire and basically figure out a path to get there. So there was a little bit of that, sharing that story, sharing the story of 3 companies and how you do different type of engineering and innovation. That was the story of the 3 companies. After that, it was we'll talk about now what it will take you to get in my shoes, essentially. Kind of learning that I suggest you do, the coaching, the mentoring, your ability to connect with people, to have compassion, an emotional side if you want. All stuff for engineers, which are, as you know, not natural to them because we're introvert. Yep. And then once you get there, the question was like, are you building a company just to make a living, or are you building a company to last? And if you're building a company to last, you have an obligation now to transfer your knowledge for people to understand the base of running the business, but also after that to do better than you. And that was the motivation to say, wow, if I do something in my career, I can watch so many people that left at one point of time and became their own franchise, and they're doing really great. It's cool to see. So that was that.
Yeah, especially in the tech industry, right? I mean, since the mid to late 90s, the tech industry has just exploded, and there's so many different companies that have grown since then with and valuations of software and tech companies is through the roof because that's where everything's headed. I mean, I just read an article yesterday that was talking about in Texas, they're building a $500 billion data center. Yeah. And it's backed by the US government. It's called Stargate. And it's going to be all about AI. So they're building this huge data center to be able to process all the AI because they think that, AI is, it's taking over everything. AI is getting to the point now where it's replacing, search browsers,
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting you talk about AI because I had to dedicate a little bit of chapter about it because I was getting all the question. Is the engineer going to be replaced by AI? Are we going to be obsolete? Are we going to embrace or fear the medium? Because for me, it's a technology, but it has an economic that is highly disruptive. But if you go back in time, it's no different than the .com, if you want, or the social networking. They all came to a point where they leverage compute, storage, the network, and create an appeal into people to say that's going to change everything. And my feeling about AI is, look, it's transformative. There's no doubt. I think like any one of those technology, you could use it for good or use it for bad. But what I like about it is, as an engineer, is I can do things literally in days what will take me months.
Yeah.
I can do it in such a collaborative space where I don't have to build like I had in the past 5,000 people team to do what I need to do. But it also comes with different level of challenge, which is what do you do with intellectual property, for
Mm-hmm.
example? If
Mm-hmm.
if AI learn from you and your business and bring that to the neighbor competitor, is that okay? So how you do privacy, how you do compliance, how you do and energize the people to say, we'll have to change your skill moving forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to you on your own to figure out the next path. So,
Yeah.
but it's changing. I mean, the world is changing around us, and put aside that you have different level of generation, as the Gen Z versus I'm a baby boomer, and you can imagine there's so many things to say. I like the power of the new generation because they have no constraint, no fears. Also, they will
Sure.
jump with their buddies and build something fast and say try to make a business. But in one point of time, I try to remind the people to say, Silicon Valley, it's an amazing story of hundred or thousand of startup. There's less than 1% that make it.
Yeah.
And there's 0.01% that lasts more than 10 years, and literally really few more than 20 years. So you're
Yeah.
like, we build all these things, innovated all this over the years, but why can we not build company to last? And for me, it's about management, it's about leadership, it's about renewal.
Yeah.
It's also becoming comfortable in your business. You think you're the best. Every time I say somebody say I'm the best, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll see that. How long it's gonna last? And it's human nature. You become complacent. You become arrogant. You become good enough, or milk the cow. If I go back
Yeah.
to the farm,
Yep.
and these behavior in one point of time, it's the responsibility of the leadership to spot them and avoid the destiny to be just in the graveyard after that.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the U.S., because the U.S. is so hyper competitive with everything.
Well, and it's a good point. It's hyper competitive, but I think people need to understand the nature of Silicon Valley was to innovate to survive. So there was always
Mm-hmm.
a fear somebody's going to beat you at the end. So, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you do it in a way that doesn't give back to the community or to the people or the employee. It's a culture. You have to have some, I call it a moral compass when you do this company. You have to be able to draw the line
Mm-hmm.
to say at
Mm-hmm.
which point of time I'm becoming a liability for my own company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting world. It's changing.
It's interesting you say that because I think there's a lot of companies. I mean, Cisco, Oracle, all of these companies that are very old now comparatively to some of the companies out now where you're right, you have to have the right leadership in place to be able to change with the ever expanding market.
Yeah.
It's changing. It changed so rapidly. 50 years ago, 100 years ago in business, um, business didn't move very fast,
Yes.
right? And then 50 years later, it moved a little bit fast. But then once the spawn of the internet and personal computing, you're seeing businesses change from maybe every 5 years to now every year they're having to reinvent themselves in some way. And if you don't have the right leadership in place to keep up with that, um, you're right. It's going to pose a very hard problem for you to be able to
Well,
continue
it's a
to
good
compete.
point because I will tell you in the past I used to say my business plan was 3 to 5 years because we were
Mm-hmm.
building so many products. We needed hardware, we needed integration, we needed this and that. That spin now is probably in the big enterprise type of company like networking or compute or you name it. It's probably a year now. The
Yeah.
funny thing is that what does it mean? You have the choice to say, I stick to my plan and I don't recognize the pace of innovation and this and that, or the leverage or the partnership I can do to reduce my costs, improve my productivity.
Yeah.
It's one way. Or you could look at this to say, wow, if I'm going to have to learn to pivot real fast because the
Yeah.
thing you don't control is going to be competitive land It's going to be another disruption that follow, let's say, AI after that. You want to be on the early adopter side, on the bleeding edge. You're a lagger, or you're like, I'll do it the last when everybody has kind of matured the technology. These things force you not only to pivot, but then the real question is, do you have the workforce to do it? So if you're changing the plan and the direction and the scale and the type of solution you're building, it's hard to believe you'll be able to do it with the same Legos. And that's where the human factor has to be part of what you think, because, I mean, you cannot just swap the company and say, oh, I'm going to do a startup within the big company and everything will be faster and better. There's an entropy everywhere. And there's people that don't want to take risks. And I think the hardest thing is when a company make it, let's say, big, they become public or they become market leader, it's hard to challenge your leader sometimes to say, well, they kind of lost the recipe, if you want.
Yeah.
Because they brought you there, you got to reward it. And that's why also, in my mind, the best thing is the one where you also have your maverick, the doctor no, but the one that say, I don't believe it, or I don't get it. Because these are the source of people that you need to have more than just a set of folks that tell you what you want to hear. And I'm saying this because it took me a while to figure out. I thought I was connected. I was getting the skip level feedback. I realized at one point of time, oh my God, I'm predictable now. They know exactly how I'm going to think, what I'm going to focus, despite the fact that if I ask them, do you believe in it? They will probably say, oh no. So how do you make sure it doesn't turn to be passive aggressive, for example?
Yes.
There's a lot of things like that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I see that all the time where people get complacent and then they can't handle constructive criticism, even at a high level position, or they're more interested in having yes men, being surrounded by yes men, rather than people that are willing to, say it to them straight. I mean, the one of the oldest sayings in business is you should not be the smartest person in the room. Yeah. If you are, you're in the wrong room.
Oh yeah, it's tough. And you talk about complaisance. I mean, I could argue that maybe executive compensation in one point of time doesn't necessarily force you to take risk. As long as you run the business and you're predictable with your shareholder, beat by a penny, and what motivated you to double the business? Well, kind of nothing. You're going to be paid the same way. You're going to put more in the bank. You're going to give dividend to people. And that's where it's dangerous, because you're like the cliffhanger. You're not moving. You're not going down. You're just hanging.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
how did you go? Because you started as an engineer. So you yourself started as a specialist and then moved into the generalist mindset. How were you able to successfully transition between those two mindsets?
Well, it came out that I went, manager, to technical lead, to, a bigger pot, if you want, more technology, more people. But in one point of time, I got extremely frustrated because the product line leadership, or the product management, if you want, were asking me to build things. And one point of time, I say, that doesn't sound right. What the hell are you thinking? I mean, why? It doesn't make any sense to me to build it. And the moment I got into, wow, I'm having more of those moments, I'm like, what? Why don't I also, I'm the one putting what's on the menu, if you want, as opposed to just cook it in the kitchen. And then that's forced me to understand, look, I don't have an MBA. I didn't have any of these things, but I had to understand market, costs, operation, if you want, a bunch of soft skill that I needed to partner. And I had to learn to say, hey, I'm never going to be that person in finance. I'm not a CFO, but if that person in finance doesn't trust the investment I make on behalf of the team and the company, guess what? I won't get budget. There was a lot of soft skill like that, which was connecting with people, especially sales, for example. One person in sales told me, look, the difference between you and me, if I don't make my quota, I get fired. For you, there will be always a tomorrow, if you want. But the only ask I ask is, if we disappoint the customer, will you come with me to explain why we did that to them? Oh,
Mm,
and the moment I had to follow the field in a day in the life of a salesperson or a customer support person, wow, does it change things between, do I rush the product or do I make it right the first time?
mm,
Or do I make it in a way that there's so much tolerance in it that you're not going to hit the limit and then everything breaks?
mm.
So there was things like that that wasn't in the book. There was no book that was telling me that.
Yeah, and I mean, sales personalities versus engineering personalities vastly different.
Oh yeah, and it's also when you meet customer that are different level, because sure, you could say you're going to meet the expert of the network at the customer, let's say, of your choice. But I was also exposed to CEO of those company, to the
Mm-hmm.
constraint, to the risk. Why should I do business with you? Well, a lot more different thing than writing code and thinking about the next release or thinking about the next generation of your product.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was forced in one ways to learn the business, but then I realized that sales are my friend. We're all linked together. There's one logo in this company.
Yeah. So throughout your iterations with the different companies that you worked for, which position, if you will, fulfilled you the most? Was it more on the ground level, the engineering side, building things, or was it when you got more to managing people and operations?
So that's a good question. I think, look, I was really late to have a P&L, if you want. I
Mm-hmm.
was essentially the team that built the infrastructure of the product for the company that I was, which led into I love engineering. I love being in the kitchen. I love to just the fact they still talk to me technically and they say, "What do you think I've done?" I was like, "My God, I'm still relevant, despite that I haven't touched a line of code in 10 years." If you want, that
Mm-hmm.
was rewarding. I think the business side came as understand the full, go to market and every cycle of production. Whereas if I want to help the company to be bigger and more profitable and be able to invest more in R&D, better get close to the business. And the last thing was like, wow, if I compete on a global scale, well, it's something to be Cisco with 50,000 people versus Juniper with 7 or 8 at the time versus Calix 700 people. So it was funny. So every time I scaled down on size and complexity, I had the same obligation of outcome. Because
Mm.
if I was smaller, my change was I'm going to be nimble. I'm going to go faster than the big guy, and then I'm going to gain more business because they know me. We build trust now. There's a
Yep.
face in this company that I can call, and that person will pick up the name. So back to
Mm-hmm.
kind of the basic of doing business, but it took me a while to figure out this thing.
So, but then at the same time, like if you compare working at a large business versus the smaller business, um, don't you think that the larger business had a lot more resources at your fingertips so that you could move quicker compared to the smaller business or the newer business?
Yes and no. I'll tell you that the bigger we were first, the cycle are longer. The entropy is big. The resistance to change is
Oh,
fundamental for a lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah.
So, in a funny way, the advantage of the big guy was more like they don't have to be necessarily on the bleeding edge of testing something. For
Mm,
example, a lot of them are not going to be in the first wave of AI tool, productivity, name it. I mean, pick up your view. They're going to wait that to see who's going to remain in 3 years of the platform of choice or the
mm-hmm,
CPU or the GPU of choice. So at the moment they know they have to jump, a lot of people have made the mistake of taking the reward, but they have the cash, for example, to acquire company. So one
mm,
way they can beat the small is they can take a leap just by partnering because of the extent of their revenue, or by acquiring that the small cannot do, because in the small you don't have a safety net. On the other end, it's really easy to motivate the people on the small because your mission is really clear. We
Yeah.
have to land. We have to go across the summit if you want.
Yeah.
There's different ways to do it, but I find out that ultimately the size of your team it's something great in one way because you have different ways to try. What I like about the big team, I could place different bet. I could
Mm.
say, I don't know, 60% of people are going to work to just pay the bills if you want. You have to secure the revenue. We have a franchise. We have a set of customers that depend on us. You guys work on there. You guys work on well, you think the next innovation disruption is going to be that? Okay, a set of us. I can put token like playing roulette in different place. And obviously, if you hit a double zero and it's not cover, you go, that's not going well. But you know what I mean? You have the choice of looking into investment at different point of time, the short term, the mid term, the long term, or the big bet. And if the big bet doesn't materialize, well, you try.
Yeah.
So, but the funny thing is, it's the same thing in the small. Because if you only have one product and you don't have the next one in the line, it's a matter of time that the big will catch up with you. So it's like a race car, if you market if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the best right now. Well, guess what? Next month there will be another one, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So it
I mean,
never stops.
Jeff Bezos is infamous for saying that when they're strategizing and planning at Amazon, they're working on technologies or new products that they're going to roll out 5 years from now,
Yeah.
not next year, not this year. They're planning 5 years ahead. So the stuff that you're seeing come out, this year was planned 4 or 5 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
that I was kind of blown away with that statement because, being a small business, it's very hard to plan that far in the future because you're so busy trying to
To make
just
it.
survive. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to survive in the current year. But I think that's just part of the ebbs and flows of business, right? You kind of keep going up and slowly,
Well,
slowly, slowly.
to your point, I think I learned it's not just build the product and the solution, but the adoption cycle can take years. Because
Mm-hmm.
you know the key, you start with few customer as an MVP, minimum viable product. You
Mm-hmm.
try then to cover the space, and then you have to go from 1 to 10 to 100 of the customer. What do I
Mm-hmm.
need to change to my solution to cover more ground? That takes adoption, that takes feedback from the customer. And if you're rushing too much, your growth is going to stall because you cut too many corners. If you want the perfect product, it might be no market left by the time you bring it to it. So it's a
Yeah.
balanced view. But what I find out is there's so much information right now. Look, in the past, if I wanted to know I'm competitive, I literally have to beg my customer to say, "Hey, what do you look at other than my company? What do you think of those guys? What do you think of those products?" And a lot of time the customer will say, you better watch those guys because they have really good stuff. But it
Mm-hmm.
was like knowledge to trust and relationship. Now, think about it with ChatGPT. My God, you can cover the ground on everything what's out there. Who's competitive? What's their strength? What their SWOT analysis of strength and weaknesses? None of this information was available for small company, put
Mm-hmm.
aside the big one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a world where data and analytic and correlation is going to be the one that make the difference between the one that survive or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So, out of all the companies that you worked for, what's probably the funnest or the most interesting product that you worked on?
Well, yeah, probably have a nostalgia of Cisco because when I went there, the company was like 700 million, and over the course of 9 years, no, 6 years, we went to 50 billion. We went from 1,000 employee to 50,000. We were doubling size and revenue every 9 months. So,
Wow.
what was crazy was, and just to give you a sense, the valuation went from, if you would have put, I think, $1 in 1992 and wait up to 2000 before the bubble burst, that dollar was worth 45,000.
Oh my God.
So in a way, what was appealing is we had no fears. And it was really funny. We're like, oh, how are we going to double the size? We need $1 billion more revenue. Well, we're going to have to expand in the adjacent market, decide if we acquire a partner or build it ourselves. We kind of had no fears because I will go to my boss and say, oh, how are we going to do that? And he will turn like, well, that's your problem. That's why we pay you for that. Go figure out. You have smart people. No, go talk to people in the valley if you completely stuck. So that kind of, there's no constraint. I'm a maverick. I'm going to make it happen. That was really fun. I think what's hard is as you go to the other company, they were already public. And the challenge he had was how do you renew yourself and stay relevant when you have so much pressure to just maintain where you are. So it's a different type of experience. The Calix was fun because we have to rethink everything, the product, the go-to-market, the customer experience, even the service provider value. And they were like, you guys are crazy a little bit. And we got lucky a little bit with COVID. And I hate to say that, but that was really good for my business. It elevated the needs of the network and the access to a level where people don't want to go back anymore. But it changed what we could do as a company, as a brand. And that was fun also. I mean, for me, it was always the learning, What am I learning? And the biggest question was, when do I reach the level where I'm plateau? So if one thing, if I could go back in time, I would have probably say, I should have moved earlier after X. Because yes, I learned after that, but I miss other thing. I miss the social networking, building these things. I wasn't involved in the cloud at the first beginning like Google was, or Facebook, or Amazon, when you think about it. So, but in one point of time, you have to choose your path and you have to trust yourself. And it was a good ride.
Yeah. And I mean, Cisco, God, I don't even hear them much anymore. I mean,
well, it's they celebrating 30 years or 35 years.
Really?
So, yeah. But the funny thing when you think about it, at the height of the bubble, the 50 billion I told you after 6 years, the revenue went down within 6 months to 18.
Oh my God.
So 2/3 of the revenue were gone. The valuation of the company was about to get to 700 billion on the path to be $1 trillion, lost 2/3 of its value, and it never came back. What came back is the revenue over time because Cisco started to diversify into different type of venue, if you want. But I don't think you will associate, for example, Cisco, and I'm probably going to offend some friends there, as the most innovative company anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I just looked them up. Their annual revenue for 2024 was 53 billion.
But if you look at it from the bubble, it took 25 years to get back.
Yeah, right. I was just going to say, and that was a decline of 5% from the prior year.
Yeah. And that's the thing is what's going to be fascinating is to see the big seven or the big enterprise company. What will be left 5 years from now after all these company AI-based or innovation by the bucket comes, and who's going to survive, or who's going to make it, or who's going to go belly up.
Yeah. And I mean, nowadays it's the big player in the game is her name just left me.
You mean NVIDIA or things like that?
Yeah, NVIDIA. Yeah. They're the big ones in the space now, right?
Yeah. But then you get also stuck with the loss of the big number. I remember at 50 billion, the expectation is to grow 10% a year. Wow. It's 5 billion more revenue on top of what you have. So that's why, I mean, those companies are forced to have a pipeline like we spoke about. Otherwise, you can't catch up 5 billion in 12 months if you're starting from scratch for ramping up. So different constraint, and ultimately we'll see how this thing leads.
Plus, I mean, their margins were pretty thick too. I mean, I think they had pretty high gross margins overall.
Well, yeah, look, if you build system, which is a combination of software and hardware, or even the cloud, I mean, you're talking about margin that could be above 60%.
That's
If
crazy.
you're in the cloud and you're purely an application and a service type of delivery, you're flirting with 80%. So,
Wow.
so if you look at the cash flow that you can generate, it's great. The question after that is you have also to start controlling your costs, because the
Yep.
more you consume, all those GPU, by the way, they're not free to to
Yeah.
run. So
Yeah.
you're gonna get a big bill.
Yep.
And the question is, how do you tune it in a way where you improve your productivity, reduce your costs, but don't get to a point that every year is going to be, 70, 65, 60, 55. And then you're going to cross a point where your own investor are going to say, whoa, 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 whoa. This is not good for me. Let's move the money to the next guy at the
Yeah.
river.
Yep.
It never
Yeah.
stops.
It doesn't. Yeah. I don't know if you saw, let me pull that up too. Cause the big thing nowadays is, being able to power all these data centers. Right.
Yeah.
And so Westinghouse just came out with this. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a mini nuclear. If you've seen this, it's a mini nuclear data center, the size of a large pool. That's going to power all of these data centers because there's not enough power in the grid to power them all.
Well, it's a good point, but there's also a contrast with this thing. The people that are going to need that level of data processing and analytic and correlation, you have to be in a sector where the sample of data is humongous. I will say for a lot of the small and medium or the mid-sized company, they're going to be able to live with a different capacity if you want. And my belief is the data center that goes in the desert and the Amazon Grab and Google, etc., you will open the door also for a lot of those data centers can serve a town in rural America or tier 3 America, because they already have the data center, a CEO, they have already a building, they have a population they serve, and the small, they don't want necessarily to have their data going 3,000 miles away and come back.
Yeah, right.
So I think we're going to see a distribution of data center from the hyperscaler down to the edge closer to where the service get delivered. So, and hopefully somebody will figure out that you don't need the latest hardware all the time to compute that. Leave it to NVIDIA, Grok, and others to address that part of the market. But there's plenty you can do in mid-town or small-town USA.
On the fiber side with bandwidth and data, I mean, is there a limitation to bandwidth on fiber compared to cable coax?
Well, look, I think it's more in order of 10x or 30x more. All the thing that we consume, and we saw it when we were trying to establish the session.
Yeah.
I doubt that for the foreseeing few years going to be more than 300 megabit at the peak. The challenge of the broadband is a share connectivity.
Which I never knew that.
Yeah, nobody consume 10 gig directly. It's not allocated like that. It's basically 10 gig in a community share amount, X amount of home.
Yep.
So you can imagine the challenge become if everybody wants to do the same thing at the same time and download the new Netflix movie or Meta universe coming to town, I'll challenge the thing. Yes, okay. Then you can go from 10 to 50 gig if you want, which it's already out there. But it gets to a point where the economic don't make any sense, because to turn on, let's say, a 50 gig home gateway, I don't think you will be interested to pay $3,000 for that.
Yeah. Right.
At retail store price.
Right.
So it gets to the demand of economic, at which point of time it's oversized. The good thing with fiber is it doesn't rust. It's once it's deployed, it's fairly stable. I mean, the squirrel don't really like to chew up fiber. There's nothing fun there. Yeah. Copper is a different thing, and cable, they have fun with that thing. It's warmer, by the way, to be around these things. So I think it's going to be always a balance to say, yes, I believe the traffic will continue to grow. Moore's law, call it the law of, maybe every 2 years the traffic will double. There's plenty of room left with fiber, but there's also economics where it's not going to be deployed everywhere, because think about a farmer with a lot of lands with automated tractor, IoT device for water, etc. Will you run a single fiber to connect that farm? Nope. Will you reach it with cable or DSL? No. So how are you going to reach it? Well, satellite or fixed wireless. So there's reach it. Well, satellite or fixed wireless. But as a nation,
I never knew that about broadband. Well, specifically on the fiber side, is that when they're advertising whatever amount of gigs they're saying they can produce, that's a shared connection amongst your community. It's not direct to your home. I always thought that was like, if I'm buying a gig, that's 1 gig to my home. No, that's a gig across however geographical area they could support.
And look, and this is where, depending of the country where you sell broadband, other countries are much more regulated into what you can advertise. So if you go in UK, for example, you will advertise at peak traffic, 4 p.m. when everybody come back and once the kid wants to play on the internet or on the iPad. You will have to prove you can sustain a rate. And the rate is not going to be the capacity of your fiber. It's going to be much less than that. In other place, you're allowed to say, at one point of time, I managed to get almost 10 gig or 1 gig, because there's ways where you can always get the traffic at the right time.
Right.
So, but again, I think speed for me, for a lot of people, you say go. I don't know in your home, but if you say I have 1 gig versus 10 gig, people are going to say, so what? What's the problem? It's hard to qualify speed as an experience if you want. What you can do is my network stable? Is my Wi-Fi reaching every kid? Can I go outside and maintain my connection? There's this experience that you want, which is seamless if you want. And imagine if you could create a grid of technology where not only I can connect outside my home, but hey, I work in the community, I'm still connected. Going into a hub versus the other, and it's completely seamless for me. Wow. That would be great. Yeah. And then you're back to the reality into how much filtering of the traffic you want, because, the security issue, there is predator out there. You want to monitor what your kids are doing on bullying and this and that. There's a debate to have to say, how much are we looking inside? What's at your home?
Right.
Versus just giving you, okay, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Will it be a better word on that? I think there's, again, social implication like everything else. What are you going to do with that?
Did you ever get involved with quantum computing at all?
Not. I have friends that went there because, look, quantum, I think, can solve problem in a non-linear way if you want. When you use processor, etc., you train them, it's still a linear ways for capacity and storage and memories to work together. This thing is almost like a parallel universe where they will be able to compute. Take AI today with the LLM and a big training engine, X amount of instruction, that will be 10 to 20, 30 times faster or can process more, simply because it's like a mesh, if you want.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the Star Trek where you play chess in 3 games. It can compute on one plane, the second, the third come back and do this. If we can make it work, and especially if he can require much less density or data center space, hopefully we can power those things. There's problem to solve like the DNA and there's a lot of healthcare that could benefit from having that compute. There's tons of things we can use to do, and it won't take 3 years to get a first estimate of what could be the solution.
Seconds.
That'd be like a brand new word. But again, every time I see those advanced technology, you still need to be able to say what you're going to do with the result.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be back into human that have to decide, is it a long term, short term, where to place the bet, what's a drawback, and there's going to be different ways to look at this because it's going to be global people participating into this.
Yeah. It's kind of exciting to me because I think, when I talk to other technology people like yourself, I always bring up the quantum question because to me that is the next level of technology. And then when you stack AI on top of that, I mean, it's like game over, right? I mean, the possibilities are endless of what's.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I like Marvel movie. For me,
yeah, oh yeah,
things like quantum, it's like the multiverse. You now open the multiverse of alternate reality if you want.
Yeah.
And can we link all of this to harness this for something good for us? That'd be fun to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the theory, right? The theory is that all of these quantum particles are actually traversing through parallel universes because the same particle can be it could be in multiple places at the same time.
Different dimensions
at the same time.
But that's why I'm like, if you try to compare that to AI, it's completely different ways. I mean, if Star Trek, for example, it's on, boldly go to where no one went before, and they go and they warp into something. That's the warp of the technology. And hopefully, I hope I'll be able to see it in action and commercialize over the next 10 to 15 years. That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, what was it? Google that just had the
demo.
Created the fastest quantum processor.
Yeah. And it's also in the space was contained. That's another thing. I mean, look, it's not like you needed to have a town to host this thing. You know?
Yeah.
It's not Project Manhattan anymore. It's
right.
It's something more tangible. But hopefully we're going to continue to invest in research for people to do it.
I agree. Yeah, it's not like the computers that they used to send a man to the moon, right? That took up a whole building. You know, now we're talking about something that's the size of a stamp, basically.
And I mean, it's going to break new frontier and remove constraint. And again, my hope is we have astute people that don't try to take it to just make a better version of what we have. I hope they're going to tackle problem that the human mind was like never going to happen.
Yeah. Michel, this was a lot of fun. I had a great conversation. Where can everyone find you, reach out to you, and buy your book?
Oh, look, the book is on Amazon, on Kindle. You just do a search it's called Beyond the Code with my name, Michel Langlois. Or you can go on LinkedIn. My profile will point it to you. And then keep me honest, send me feedback, and hopefully you will appreciate the time of reading it. And there's an audible version that will be coming soon. So enjoy.
Awesome.
Thanks
so
for
much.
your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.